Hello there everyone, and welcome to a new video on the Future Programmer YouTube channel about the Streamlit package in Python. In this tutorial, we're going to talk about text elements in Streamlit and how you can use them to display different kinds of text in your Streamlit applications. Without further ado, let's begin. As you can see on my screen, I have two windows open on my computer. On the left side, I have Sublime Text open, which is a code editor where I will be editing my code. On the right side, I have Google Chrome open, which is a web browser where we will be viewing the result of my code. Right now in my file, I have just comments about what we will be learning in today's lesson and no actual code. But regardless, let's first run this file in such a way that we can see the result in our web browser. If you're using Sublime Text and the Sublime Streamlit package, then what you can do is press Ctrl-Shift-B and click on Streamlit. And you can see the Streamlit application open on our web browser. If you're not using Sublime Streamlit, then what you can do is open up a terminal for your current folder and type in Streamlit, run, and then the name of your file, which in this case, I have named mine textelements.py, and then press enter. But since I already have the application open and running, I will not be doing that. The first line of code in a Streamlit application is typically going to be importing st. So we're going to write import Streamlit as st. What this is doing is we're importing the Streamlit package under the alias under the name st. So now we can use st to access everything under Streamlit. The first function we're going to learn about Streamlit is the st.write function. So st.write. Like this. Now, even though this function is actually capable of a lot more, we can use it to display graphs, we can use it to display tables, etc. The most common use of st.write is undoubtedly going to be about text elements. So I can put something such as a string inside of this function. So for example, I wrote this using st.write. On the right side though, you'll see there's no actual update in our application. However, you will see source file changed, and we have two options. We can either rerun it or always rerun. If I click on always rerun, then every time I save my Python file, what's going to happen is on the right side, the application is going to be changed based on what I modified on the left side. However, if I click on rerun, that means every time I have to click on it. So every time I change something on the left, I'll either be clicking the rerun button or using the R key on my keyboard. So if I just press R right now on my keyboard, we'll see the new code being run and the results being displayed on the right side. So depending on what you want to do, you can either always rerun or you can click on rerun every time. So I'll just be using rerun every time since I save my files a lot and it's just a little bit easier that way. So here we have st.write. I wrote this using st.write. And we can also do other things such as printing out variables. So if I have a variable called, let's say num is equal to a number 1, 2, 3, 4, and I use st.write 1, 2, 3, or not 1, 2, 3, 4, but instead num, then on the right side, we'll see 1, 2, 3, 4 once I click rerun. And let's just for fun also try something else. So st.write, let's say we want to have a dictionary. So in this case, I have numbers, numbers, and then 1, 2, 3, 4, and then booleans, and let's say true and false. On the right side, I can either click rerun or press the R key on my keyboard, and we'll see the results being updated right here. And depending on what you choose to print out using st.write, there will be different behavior. For example, here we have a number, and it's in green, and this is a string, so it's in just regular text. Here we have a dictionary, so we can even do something such as nesting in and out of our dictionary right here. So that's the different uses of the st.write. And there's also a lot more you can do with this function, but in terms of printing out text, that's going to be it for this function during this lesson. So let's comment this out and talk about magic. Magic actually goes hand in hand with the st.write function. So what magic is doing is it allows us to display text or data frames or graphs or whatever's simply by typing something in a new line. So instead of having to call st.write, we can just put, for example, this right here on a new line and we'll be able to print it out. So I'm just going to copy this right here and put it here. And instead of st.write, I'll be changing it to magic. And you can see on the right side, we can see I wrote this using magic. We don't have to call any function, we can just put it on a new line. And the same thing with if I have num is equal to 1, 2, 3, 4, and I just type num on a new line. And we'll see 1, 2, 3, 4 being displayed. And the same thing with this dictionary right here. So if I just copy this and put it on a new line here, we'll see the results being displayed on the right side again. And just a quick side note, if you try to use the print function in a Streamlit application, it actually won't work. So if I try to print out hello, and if I just save this file and press rerun, we'll actually see nothing being printed out in either the console or in the actual application. That's because we're actually not running this as a Python file, but Streamlit is actually taking over the file, running it using its own engine. So that means the print function doesn't actually do anything. So what you can do instead is just simply use magic to print it out. So now we can see hello being displayed on the actual application. So let's delete this line right here and comment out all this code about magic. And now let's talk about Markdown. If you're not familiar with Markdown, don't worry, it's basically a type of code which allows us to display formatted text with syntax such as bolding or italics or heading, etc. So what we're going to do is I'll just be showing you an example, and if you're familiar with Markdown, you'll know exactly what it's doing. If not, don't worry about it. So we can have st.markdown, and we can have, let's just delete this for a second here. So for body, I will be putting in bold Streamlit, and then Streamlit, and then in code I'll have st.markdown is, and then in underscore, so italics is cool. So if I run this, we'll see Streamlit is bolded, and that's because it is inside of these asterisks, double asterisks. The st.markdown looks formatted as code with a gray background sort of, and that's because it is inside of backticks, and cool is inside of underscores, which means it is italicized. And that's all because of the markdown function being called with this string as the actual markdown code. And if you noticed earlier, when I press down st.markdown, there's actually two arguments that we can pass in. The first of which is the body, and that is the actual markdown code that we see here. But we also have the option of unsafe allow HTML. So this is a function argument that is present in some of the functions for Streamlit. And what it is doing is that by default, if I have HTML code in the body of this function call, it is going to be displayed as actual code, so actual text. So for example, let's just give you an example here. Instead of body, I'm going to make a multi-line string, and I'll be typing in some valid HTML code. So I have OL, so ordered list. If you know what this is, then that's great. If not, don't worry about it. Basically, this is HTML code. So OL, and then I have LI, which is list item. I have, let's say, learn Streamlit and make cool apps. If I run this code right now, we'll see the actual HTML code displayed. And if that's what you want to do, perfect, that's totally fine. But if you want to actually render the HTML code as HTML, then what you can do is change this argument from false to true. And now if I run this code, we'll see 1, 2 with learn Streamlit and make cool apps. So effectively, we can use the markdown function to insert HTML code inside of our Streamlit application. And you can do a lot of cool stuff with this. For example, you can insert styling using CSS code inside of HTML using Markdown. Even though it says unsafe allow HTML, it means it is actually not entirely safe sometimes to do this. It is usually safe though, especially if you're just running a small application on your own computer. So that's one of the things you can do with st.markdown. The next 4 functions that we're going to talk about go pretty similar to each other. So we have title, header, subheader, and caption. And essentially what they do is they all just display different styles of text. So title, of course, is the biggest, followed by header, subheader, and caption is generally for explanatory text for different elements. So let's just use st.title, and let's put in something like title here. And then for header, we have just header. and then text is header here, subheader. Oops, I spelled that wrong. So for caption, lastly, we'll have caption and caption. So if I run this code right here, we can see title here. That is usually the topmost text in your application to explain what your application is doing. Header is generally the secondary level of your text hierarchy to show different sections of your actual application. Subheader follows that, and caption is usually, you can use captions to explain an image or a graph or something along those lines. Next, let's talk about using the st.code function. So we can actually use Streamlit to display properly highlighted code. So for example, if I have st.code, I can pass in two arguments, the body, which is the actual code that we want to display, and then the language, which in this case, it defaults to Python. So we can have something like st.code, and then inside of it, we can have a text of st.code, and you get the idea. So we have a line of Python code here, and we select the language is equal to be Python. And we can see this code block displayed with this Python code right here. You can see because this is a string, it is displayed in green, and we can also even copy this code right here using this button to copy to clipboard. And for fun, let's just type in some HTML code to show how that works. So I can also use other languages in addition to Python. So for example, I can have h1, and inside of here, I can have st.code. And basically, we'll see that displayed on our screen. Next, we can display formatted text using st.text. So we have, let's just say, here's some text. And we can see it looks slightly different than all of the other text that we see here, and that's because this is pre-formatted and the different characters are fixed width. And next, we can talk about the LaTeX function of Streamlit. So LaTeX is a special software that we can use to display, among other things, math equations and math formulas. And since sometimes we need to display math inside of Streamlit applications, there is this st.latex function, which allows us to display mathematic equations and formulas in our applications. So if you know how to use LaTeX, that's perfect. If not, it's basically a way to show math. So here I'm just going to use an example of the quadratic formula. So we have an R string, a raw string, and we have a fraction, which means we have a numerator and a denominator. The numerator is going to be negative b plus or minus square root of b squared. And then we have minus 4ac, and the denominator is going to be 2a. So like this. If you know what this means, perfect. If not, don't worry about it. Basically, it's a way to show this formula right here. It looks pretty cool though. And lastly, let's talk about the st.divider function. This is a way of showing a divider in our application. So st.divider, like this. And if I run this, we'll see a line, a grayish line displayed on our screen. You can see it more clearly if I zoom in a little bit. We can also put it in between things. So for example, if I try to put this in between the two code blocks and run this, you'll see we have a divider between the Python code here and the HTML code here. So let me just uncomment all of the codes that we have written to show everything we did today. And I'm going to zoom out and run this. So to quickly recap, in today's lesson, we talked about the different types of text that we can display using various functions in Streamlit in our applications. If you found this video to be helpful, please consider subscribing down below to the Future Programmer YouTube channel. If you have any questions, feel free to leave them in the comment section. And with that said, thank you very much for watching this Streamlit tutorial, and I hope to see you in more videos about programming in the future. In the meanwhile, happy Streamliting!